welcome back. We are at day 2, and for day 2 we have Apex triggers. Day 1 we did getting started with Apex triggers, and now we're going to do bulk Apex triggers, which I think is pretty far because there's a lot of concepts we didn't really even talk about yet, um, especially for bulk. So let's click it and let's take a look. This might be an opportunity to talk about quite a bit. For instance, bulk um, makes me think of um, governor limits in Salesforce. I feel that people actually dislike programming in Salesforce because there are governor limits. I think the opposite. I feel like since there are governor limits, it made me a better developer. That's my opinion on it. If you don't know what governor limits are, go ahead and look that up. Salesforce governor limits. As we talked about before, I've already done all of these last year. I'm just doing them again in an effort to kind of pick my brain and explain it. So let's go ahead and retake this challenge. I didn't read it, I just kind of scrolled through it. So let's click on retake challenge and see what's in here. This time we're on opportunity, and let's just take a quick look here. This trigger will add a task to any opportunity inserted or updated with the stage of closed 1. Okay, a few things kind of popped out to me there already that are a lot of good concepts. Um, and in kind of keeping with the spirit of, explaining as I go, um, let me take an opportunity to kind of explain triggers. Let me launch this, and then while it's kind of doing its thing, I'll talk. Oh, I already had it open. Um, a trigger allows you to do something via code after someone or something interacts with your Salesforce record. For example, after you click save on an opportunity, let me go back again. After you click save on an existing opportunity, you might have some code that runs that updates that record. You might also have some code that maybe inserts a record. So there's two different contexts there. There's insert and update. Then there's also, as we saw, and I'm going to open up the developer console so you can kind of look at this. I want to get into a few things. Let me go file. We're going to make a new trigger, I'm pretty sure. Let's go look at it. The Apex trigger must be called closed opportunity trigger. You saw before I'm a huge copy paste fan. I don't like to accidentally spell something wrong, and this is going to be on opportunity and click submit. So there's our new trigger. But why are we here? Why are we even making a trigger? Why are we making a trigger on before insert? What is that? You make a trigger, and this is sort of a succinct way of saying it. You make a trigger after all else fails. Might be one way of saying it. I've spent a lot of time after someone asked me for a feature. I spent a lot of time trying to get it to work with a workflow rule, and if that didn't work, I said, let me try it with the process builder. If that didn't work, let me try it with flows. So you can spend a lot of time trying those other ways because that's easier, potentially, using clicks to just kind of design your process. If all of those fail, then you come out and try to make a trigger out of it. So that's why we're here. And then we have a few other contexts here. Notice here it said, I think it said insert or update, right? So the trigger will add a task, and that's key. The trigger will add a task to any opportunity inserted or updated. So let me come back here. Insert, and actually needs to, well, we'll talk about that later. Inserted or updated, and there is, I think these are called trigger context variables. Oh, I was really hoping it would do that. I think it's is insert, and let's do it like this so the context awareness will work. Or I'm sorry, so it won't throw us an error. So there's a system class in Salesforce, there's a trigger class in Salesforce, and then you have these context variables here. Is insert, is update, and you can actually utilize those to, and this is beginner class, so we probably won't be touching on these, but you can actually use these trigger context variables to say, okay, only do this, only run this code if it is in fact an insert, or if it is in fact an update. And here we're actually saying, run this code if it is an insert, or if it is an update. Hopefully you know what the difference is there. And also, this is important because we're going to have to get into this in a second. System, and we don't even have to do that. I just put that to show where it exists. So is insert is the same as system dot trigger dot trigger dot, and I think you can do is before and is after as well. Is after. So those all, just save and get to see, are those accurate? Okay, so those all can be used for something, and you would probably do something like if it's an insert and it's a before insert, and that, and then maybe do after, like that. It might be, you might be have code something like that, and this, again, this is kind of further away than where we are, but that might be a way you could actually set up your trigger to make your logic flow easier. So if it's an insert and it's a before insert and an after insert, and let's actually show that that might be too much, so you probably want to make sure you Google this stuff, and I will do that now. I think this is called order of operations, order of execution. Here we go. So I think this is right. Okay, it is. Perfect. So this is key. You have to know this. I'm going to search for the word trigger, and I think it will. Okay, perfect. So there is, okay, perfect. When you save a record with an insert or update, then this is the order that Salesforce goes through, or this is the order of steps it takes. And triggers are just a small piece of that. Your workflow rules are in here, and your validation rules, this is all in here. So knowing where your triggers will actually fire will also help you understand how you have to build your trigger. So it shows here that the before triggers fire, then it does stuff, and then the after triggers fire. We have to use an after trigger in this one. Scroll this over. We have to use an after trigger in this one because it said we have to add a task. So in order to, well, let me go into that. Since this is on an opportunity, when an opportunity is in, if the state of an opportunity goes to closed one, we want to make a task. I can use it. I can do a before insert or before update if I want to update fields on opportunity, but I have to use an after insert or after update since I want to update fields or create new records on a different object, in this case task. So I'm going to change that to after. So only do this after an insert or after an update. And we're going to loop through our records again for opportunity. Get a variable in our loop to, and then last time we did trigger.new. Now we can, so this would work too. System.trigger.new, same thing. And trigger.new is all of the records that got inserted. Since this is bulk, I'm assuming it's going to let us know that, yeah, okay. So this challenge is going to send us 200 records. So it's going to loop through this 200 times. That's key. That's huge. So anything that we do here in this loop, we have to make sure we do that efficiently, or we'll run into these governor limits that I talked about earlier. So let's see, there'll probably be opportunities for me to talk about that as we go through. So let's look. All right, create an Apex trigger called close opportunity trigger with the opportunity trigger active if an opportunity is inserted or updated with a stage of closed one. Okay, so we need, hopefully our context, it does. So I've clicked O dot, now I have the actual fields. I think it said stage, and I believe it's stage name. I think that's the right field, and hopefully you noticed that was a pick list. If you're coming from if you're coming from using formulas or workflow rules, you might be familiar with using something called pick val. You don't have to do that here. So in formulas, maybe you'd have to do is pick val and then the field name, and it's probably just called stage there. You have to do that to say is pick val stage and then the value. I think it said closed one. So that would be how you would do that in formula, but in Apex it's actually different. It's actually and it's an if stage name is equal to closed one, then do something. And the do something is in these brackets here. And there's another, you can probably do that another way as well. Let's make sure that saves. It says we have a problem there. Missing. Okay. Get rid of that. We can probably even, since we did that system class earlier, I think there's a system dot equals that takes two objects. That probably is the same thing. Need two. Yeah, that might also work. It does? Okay. So that's the same thing as, and that's kind of confusing looking. I try my best to make the code that I write look simple in an effort to assist that next person who's coming behind me to clean up my code, change my code, and more often than not, that person is me. So I don't want to confuse myself either. So let's get that field back. If the stage name of this opportunity, and we're running through these, so the first opportunity they pass to us, if the stage name of the opportunity is closed one, then do something. And I do want to take a little bit of time here. As I was writing that, I could feel myself not liking it. So closed one, you saw me type it in there, but I wanted to make a double check. I didn't copy paste. I don't like to, this is called a magic number, sort of programmer lexicon, magic number, look that up. I don't like to have magic numbers in my code because I might be able to use that same value somewhere else. Number one, sort of a side benefit. That's number two. Number one, I want to know what this is. What is closed one? I can make it so much easier for myself if I make a constant variable. In Salesforce, it's called a final variable. If I make a constant variable and give it a name that makes sense. So let me try that. And I'll literally say it's private static final. It's a string. And let's say task stage closed one. Something like that. That makes it easier for me to know what this is. So if I say task if I give this a variable name here that makes more sense to me, then that helps me to understand what this closed one is. When it's just closed one here, Then I have to say, okay, what is this? Okay, it equals this. It might not be as simple though. It might not actually say stage name here. There might be a poorly named variable here, for example. But and so that's not the only reason. Like I said, I can think of just two reasons off the top of my head. First, you want to kind of more easily or explain what this is, what this closed one actually means. In this case, it's the stage field on task that's closed one. So, okay, got it. That makes sense. And let's say I needed to use that multiple times. This is a very contrived, a very simple example. But if I had 50, 100, couple hundred lines of code and I need to use closed one several times, it wouldn't make a lot of sense to just continually type that and mess that up. I would always try to use this. And I'll get an error if I spell this wrong. Why do I have an error here? I need to do 2 equals. I'll always get an error if I do that. It'll say, I don't know what you're talking about. But I won't get an error if I accidentally spell this wrong. I won't get an error there. So at compile time, yeah, I won't get an error there. So I won't know if my code is broken. Here, I'll know that I did something wrong. So at compile time, it's letting me know, yeah, you can't do that. That doesn't make sense. So just an easier way of me making sure I don't inadvertently add a bug that I'm trying to debug later. Okay. If an opportunity is inserted or updated with a stage of closed one, it has to create a task. Okay. This is a bulk Apex exercise. So, I think what they're trying to explain to us is, yeah, that's the meat of this. What they're trying to explain to us is, I could make a task, new task, and let's put the stage in there too. Stage name equals closed one. And the reason I actually wrote it in there is I'm going to take this and go out to the developer console execute window. Oh, I did that earlier. Good. Same thing. Go out to the developer window here and actually I'm actually going to create a record in code. So here's my task. Now I'm going to insert it. Execute. Stage name doesn't exist on task. O.stage name. Oh, right. It's a task. I actually don't know what the fields are on task. Let's see. Let's see if it'll let us insert it. It will. Okay. So I just made a task there. Let's actually go out and look at it. Oh, I can do it here. So let's look at the task that probably got inserted. I'm going to go to File, Open, and then come out to Objects. It's already there. I'm going to sort them so I can see, and then head down to Task. Task. There should be one record in here. Query, execute. There is. So one record. I just pulled up the ID. That's the only thing that's in there, and I'm going to show that again in case you missed that. So debug, open execute anonymous window, paste in whatever code I want to run, and hit execute. And then I went to File, Open, and then Objects. Then I went to the task object, and it opens the task object. I can see all the fields that I want. So I hit ID, and I think it wanted us to actually put something in there. So let's find the name of that value since we're here. The subject, okay, the task has to be created with the subject of follow-up task. So let's see if there's a subject on here. Subject. I don't see the value subject. So let's sort it. subject. Okay. And it's a combo box. All right, so that means we actually have to add that value as well. So, okay, and I can actually show this. This is perfect. So let's do, I'm going to take that value. Why isn't it letting me do this? I want ID and, I want ID and subject. I did control click. I'm going to click query, and it's going to show me my query here. And the reason I wanted that is I wanted to just copy that out. Again, I'm a huge fan of that. And I'm going to go to debug and actually type in subject equals and then the value that they wanted me to populate in there, which is follow up. I'll copy it. Follow up test task. So copy this. And now if I hit execute, I could have swore I would get an error, but I didn't. Okay, so let's just do it. I'm going to go out there and actually show that. So best practice is probably to do what I'm about to do. Let's come out here and let's go to task, which I believe is, well, let's just do this. I'll go to the quick find window, type task, and go to the task fields, and the value is subject. I'm going to click it. There's not a value in here called whatever it was, follow-up test task. So this particular field allows us to put in something that doesn't exist already. It's probably best practice to add a new one. So add follow-up test task in there. So let's do that. That's probably the best way to do that. So we know how that works. So that's, let me come back out to debug. So we want to do this. Oh, and you know what? I'm going to copy this. We want to do this, but do it efficiently. Again, this is the bulk example. Save. So that's the new task. Oh, and it also wants us to link the task to the opportunity, which I think is what ID? O.ID. So as it's passing in opportunities, I want the ID of the opportunity we're looking at now. So, and then link that task to this. Okay. So, if I run this, or if I allow this code to, and you know what, that's probably the end. Let's actually run it and see if we get an error. I've been surprised that I haven't been getting errors. Yeah, what ID? I'm surprised that we haven't been getting errors, but this one, this has to give me an error. So it's specifically telling me we're going to throw 200 records at you, and I'm going to try to insert this 200 times. That means I'm going to get one opportunity that has a stage of closed one. I'm going to then create a task linked to that opportunity and then insert it. Do something called DML. Let me show you why this should fail. Googling here, Salesforce. You know what? I talked about governor limits earlier, so now I'm just going to bring it over and just see if this is a good enough example here. Okay, perfect. Salesforce governor limits. I'm going to search for DML, and good, there was an example there. Okay. Total number of DML statements issued. I can only do 150. We're going to get 200 records sent to us, but I can only do in a single context, and this is in a context as in someone clicks save. Before it's done, before Salesforce is done processing everything I told it to do, I can only do 150 DML statements, and this insert, that's a DML statement. If I get 200 opportunities sent to me, and I can only do this 150 times, I'll get an error. So I have to fix that. So I'm going to click check challenge, and I should get an error here. And you know what? I should actually click. I have to hit run all, I think. Or maybe not. Let's see if I just get an error. I have to. Okay, perfect. System.limit exception. Too many DML statements. 151. So I can only do 150 DML statements. It got to 151 and then stopped and said you can't do that. Salesforce is a multi-tenant environment. Look that up. Uh, I am unable to, as one developer, I cannot just do something that hogs all the resources of somebody else. Salesforce, and I talked about this earlier with governor limits, I said Salesforce made me a better developer. I need to program more efficiently, so instead of doing 150 DML statements, and let me just kind of walk through that, I'm going to get an opportunity sent to me from the system, and then make a task, and then say, okay, Salesforce, here's the task I want to update or insert. Do that. Then come back, another opportunity. Hey, Salesforce, here's the task. Insert that. That is inefficient. What I want to do is actually have my entire stack of tasks. You know, you can almost think about it like a piece of paper. You're giving somebody a piece of paper. That person goes back, does something, and then when they come back, you give them another piece of paper. That's inefficient. Just give them all 200 pieces of paper at one time. That's so much more efficient. So that's what we have to do here. So instead of that insert there, I want to move my insert out of my 200. So I'm doing this 200 times. I only want to insert one time. But what do I insert? I want to insert my task, but I can't do that. First, my task only exists in this context. I declare this variable here, so it's a local variable in this. It's going to let me know that doesn't even exist. Variable does not exist t, which is fine. I actually want up here, so let's make it more global. I want to, we'll make it static again, but not final because we're going to change it. Final means I can't change this ever. I'm gonna omit the final here and make a list of tasks. I'm saying here, and it's, if you're coming from a different programming language, it's like an array, but it's excellent because I don't have to declare the amount of records in the array up front. So instead of inserting this task, I want to insert this task list. I want to, so to speak, hand that piece of paper. I only want to give that person the piece of paper, that transaction, one time. Here's all 200 pieces of paper. Task list. So I want to insert just task list the one time, but I need to actually still do something with this task that I made. So I want to say here, every time you go through this, put that new task in this sort of stack of tasks here. So do this 200 times. You're going to give me 200 opportunities, and I'm going to make 200 tasks. And every time I do that, just add it to this variable here. Just have this sort of stack of tasks waiting. And when I'm finally done, just insert all of them one time. Let's see if that works better. I'm going to hit check challenge. Should work, but I'm getting nervous. There we go, and we got it. So that was an explanation about batch. Salesforce does all of its updates in batches. If you use the data loader and you import a ton of new records, Salesforce is going to do that 200 at a time. It's going to send 200 records, and then after that, it's going to do the next 200. So all of your code has to be able to adhere to these governor limits, which I showed you before. So it's going to run through 200 records and do something. So Another example might be a query. I can only do 100 queries. So I couldn't put a query in here either. I have to find a better way to get that data. I can't do a query in here because it will at 101 because I can only do 100 queries. You saw earlier I got bumped up at or I got stopped at 151. I would get stopped at 101 here. If I put a query in here and said every time go out and look at the database, I couldn't do that. I have to put that somewhere outside of my 200 limit loop. So that's what we had to do here today with batch Apex, or I guess was it batch triggers. So that was the example here today.